Hello! This is Matt from Heaney Apps, and this is part 5 in our 7-part full game tutorial series where I'll be teaching you how to make the full iPhone game 7 Sides in Xcode using SpriteKit and Swift. So far we have the colour wheel and we have all of the balls, and now all of the balls can make contact and hit the sides of the colour wheel. In this video, we will set up what we want to happen when a ball hits a side and the colour of the ball and the side match. So in this game, that would be a correct answer. That's what you have to do in this game. So we want to code for the ball to only delete and a brand new ball to spawn when a ball is hit a side and the colours match. We will set up our score, we will play a sound effect, we will set up the high score, and then we will set up the level system or the difficulty system in our game. So when your score gets higher, the ball will move faster to make the game more difficult. So by the end of this video, your game will look like this. So let's jump straight back into Xcode. Okay, so back into Xcode and back to our game scene. So in this video, we will set up what we want to happen when a ball hits a side and the ball and the side match. So the ball and the side are the same colour. So far in our code, we have set up the contact and we are checking to see if the ball and the side match when they hit. So at the moment when the ball and the side hit, if they match, we're simply printing correct down in the log, and if they don't, we are printing incorrect. So today we will set up what we want to happen in our game when the ball and the side match. So when the answer is correct. So what do we want to happen in our game when the ball and the side match? Well, we want this to happen. We want to delete the ball and spawn a new ball. We want to add a point to our score and show this in a label. We want to play a sound effect. We want to see if we've set a new high score, and if we have, show our new high score in the label at the top. And we also want to make the ball move faster if we hit a certain score. So it sounds like we have a lot to do, but so much of our code is now in place, and the way that we sort of structured everything, this should be pretty quick to do. So to start with, we only want to let a new ball spawn and only make the ball scale down and delete if the ball and the side match, because if the ball and the side don't match, then we will do something else. As you will see in the next video, we would make the ball flash, and then we wouldn't want to spawn a new ball as the game would have finished. At the moment, however, we are deleting this ball and spawning a new ball whenever there has been a contact. So we don't want to do this here. So we will grab the ball.delete and the spawn ball from our did begin contact. We will copy it and delete it from here. What we then want to do is only delete the ball in this way and spawn a new ball if the ball and the side match. So we could paste this in here and add all of the rest of the stuff that we need, so all of our score system and all of that here. However, that will make this function very messy, because this function will then be in control of checking to see if the ball and the side match, and what will happen if they do match, and what will happen if they don't match. That's going to be a lot of code. That's going to get very messy. So what we're going to do instead, rather than paste in these two here, what we will do, we will create another function. So making sure you're outside of any other functions, we will say func, and we will call this correct match, and we pass in a ball. Then in our check match function, when the ball and the side do match, we will simply run correct match and pass in the ball from the contact. So we only want to pass the ball in. We won't be affecting the side in any way, we'll only be affecting the ball. So if the ball and the side do match, run correct match, which will run this block of code, passing down the ball, and here we will delete the ball and spawn a new ball. So now any code in here is going to run when the ball and the side match. And as we want to affect the ball that we're checking, we're going to run this function, passing in the ball so we can deal with it down here. So now, when there's a contact, we're checking to see if the ball and the side match by passing the ball and the side in the contact into our check match function. Here, we're saying if that ball and if that side match, run the correct match function, and as we want to affect the ball some more, we're passing the ball from this function, therefore the ball in that contact, down into this new function so we can affect it. So we're passing the same objects around all over the place. And this is one of those things that when you're starting out can look really confusing. However, this will make your code so much more manageable because now it's very clear what's happening. We haven't got spaghetti code and we haven't got code just lumped together. We can break this down fully. When there's a contact, we're running check match and passing what we need into check match to check to see if the ball and the side match. If the ball and the side do match, we're going to run correct match, this, and passing the ball down because we want to affect the ball. It just keeps everything separate and it will make sure that every function just does one job. So now with that, what's going to happen is our ball will only delete in this way and a new ball is only going to spawn if the ball and the side match. And this is important because we will be doing something different if the ball and the side do not match. So test this out, hit run and start the game and spin the wheel enough so the ball will hit the side with the same colour. We'll get another ball. But if the ball and the side do not match, nothing is going to happen. Good, so now the ball is only deleting and a new ball is spawning if the ball and the side match. So that's our first job done, which is pretty cool. Now the game will only continue if the ball and the side match. The next thing we want to do is set up our score system, and this will simply be a number that will display on the screen. Every time the ball hits a side and the colours match, we will add 1 to this number. So every time the ball and the side match, you get a point. So we need a new variable, which would be an integer, a full number, to keep track of our score. Now we want to use this number here in the game scene, but we also want to use it later in this series in the game over scene, because we want to show our score on the game over scene. So we want to use this variable in multiple scenes. So we will declare this in our models and data, because anything we set up here, we can use all over the place in our project. So if we have a new section for score system, and here we will declare a brand new integer called score, which we will set to 0. So we now have this score integer, which will keep track of the score in our game. And because we have declared this in our models and data, rather than in the game scene, we will now be able to use this all over the place. So our new score variable will keep track of the score in our game, and every time we earn a point, we will update the value of score by adding 1 to this score variable. This score variable has a starting value of 0 because obviously we want the score to start at 0. In the next video, when we deal with restarting our game when it's game over, we will set the value of score back to 0. So for every new game that begins, this score variable will be set to 0. Command B to build, and then this will simply be as quick as saying, when we have a correct match, take score and add 1 to it. This will keep track of our score, and we will earn a point every time the ball and the side hit and they have the same colour. Now that's pretty cool, but we now need a label to show this score, otherwise the gamer won't be able to see it. So, here in the game scene, what we will do, we will globally declare a new label. We will set this up and add it in our did move to view because we want it on the scene straight away, and we can simply update the text whenever we add a point. So globally, we will say let score label, it'll be an SK label node, and it will use the font Caviar Dreams, the custom font that we set up in this project a couple of videos ago. So we now have this brand new label that will show what score we are on. Into our did move to view, and here we will set this label up and we will add it to our scene. So we want to take score label, and its starting text will simply say 0. Score label will be in a position halfway across the scene and 85% of the way up. This will have a font color of dark grey. It will have a font size of 225, and then simply add score label like so. So we now will have a label on the scene straight away, which will show the text that says 0, because that will be the starting score in our game. Hit run. Let's make sure our label is adding to our scene in the exact way that we want it, just like so. We now have this label at the top of the screen that will say 0. So now all we have to do whenever we update our score is take score label and change the text to show our score. And all we want to do here, after we've added 1 to our score, is show the value of score. So // and a variable or a constant name between brackets will say to our code, go get the value of score and display that here. And just with that, we're saying update our score and show this number here in our label. And that will update our label to show our score. So hit run and test this out. As you can see, our score is now updating if the ball and the side match. If they don't match, our score is not updating. Awesome. Score system now in place. Great. So now, when the ball and the side hit, if the ball and the side match, the gamer can earn a point. Now, in addition to adding a point to their score and displaying their score in the label, we want to play a quick sound effect, just to add a little something to this and to polish it off just a little bit. So for this, the first thing that we have to do, we have to grab our sound effect and import it into our project. So the one that I will use is here on my desktop, and there is a link down in the video description to get this sound effect. It's a free sound effect. Full credits for this sound effect are down in the video description. Up to you if you get this sound effect or use your own sound effect, or if you don't want a sound effect, just skip this next bit. So all we would do is grab the sound effect and drag it into our files over here on the left. Make sure copy items if needed is ticked, because this will make a copy of the sound effect in your projects folder. Make sure this down here is ticked and hit finish. And we now have the sound effect down in our project. And we want this sound effect to play when you score a point. And it sounds like this. So to get this sound effect to play, all we have to do is set up and run an action. So we can use actions for sound effects. So here in the correct match function, we will say let, and we will call this play correct sound, being skaction.playSound file named, and the sound we want to play is called correctsound.wav. So this has to match the file name over here, so it's got to be the exact same, lowercase c, capital S.wav. If you have downloaded a sound effect with a really long name, click on it and push enter, and you can rename it. So rename it something much easier to type into your code. So if we run this action, it will play this sound effect. Wait for completion will be false, because what this would do, this would affect this action playing in a sequence. So basically, if this action was in a sequence, if this was false, the sound effect would start playing and the next action in a sequence would start straight away. If it's true, the entire sound effect would play in a sequence before the next action would start. But this won't be in a sequence, so this won't actually have any effect on us at all. And then all we have to do is run this action on the scene. So self.run play correct sound. This will then play that sound effect in the scene. And just with that, with those 2 lines, we can now play a sound effect in our game when the ball and the side hit, and the ball and the side match. Now, just like we have done in the past, because this exact same action will run every single time you score a point in the game, rather than declaring it here, copy this, we will declare this globally in the scene with our other action. Let's keep it all nice and organized. And this will declare this action once and let us run this action. So let us play this sound effect whenever we score a point, and we can simply just declare this action once in our game. And doing this is actually quite important for the sound effect, because if you was to declare it within the function, there's always a little bit of lag the first time the sound effect plays, which is really frustrating. And that doesn't happen if you declare the action to play the sound effect globally. So now not only are we setting this action up only once, rather than redeclaring it every single time we score a point, we will not get the lag the first time it plays. So let's test this out. Let's hit run. So now we will have our sound effect. If when you're running this on the simulator, you get a whole bunch of funky stuff down here, don't worry about that. It's not a problem at all. You normally get a whole bunch of stuff down in the log when it comes to doing certain things in the simulator. It's not an error at all. It's just stuff from the simulator. So now, if we score a point, we get our sound effect. And if the ball hits the side and they don't match, we do not get our sound effect. Great, so when the ball and the side match, we get our point and we get our sound effect. So that's the base of our score system. And with that now set up, we can move on to something that links in very heavily to our score system. So we will now move on to set up the high score in our game. And this will involve setting up a label to be on the screen here in our game scene, and this label will show the best score the player has ever got in our game. Okay, so for the high score, there's a couple of different things we have to do. Here in the game scene, we have to load up our high score, and then at the end of the game, if we've set a new high score, we want to save this new high score. And it's really important that we're saving this high score rather than just setting our high score to a variable, because when the game is closed on a device, any of the values in our game are pretty much just wiped. So if we was to have our high score just as a variable, as soon as our game was closed, it would just be wiped. And the next time the gamer played our game, their high score wouldn't be there. Their high score would be set back to 0. So we want to be saving our high score. And we do this by storing values in the user defaults. This is a part of our game or of any app that is stored in memory, and it will stay there until the app or the game is deleted. So what we can do, we can store information in the user defaults, and we can retrieve information from the user defaults, effectively saving this information. So this is perfect for our high score. So we want to save and load our high score. And this is one of those things where it links together pretty heavily. So we'll do one at a time, but only when we have the loading and the saving set up will it make perfect sense. So we have to start by loading the high score. So globally in the scene, we will say var, we'll call this high score, and this will be set to whatever we have stored in the user defaults. So user defaults.standard.integer, and then whatever we have saved as high score saved. This will go to our user defaults, it will find an integer saved as high score saved, it will retrieve this information and set it to high score. All we then have to do is when the game has finished, if we have set a new high score, save this high score as high score saved. So that's what we're going to do. We will now save our high score if we have set a new high score. So for this, what we're actually going to do is we have to jump forward just a little bit, and we have to set up the function that will run when the game has finished. So when the ball hits a side and the colours do not match, so there has been a wrong match. Now this function will be the main focus of the next video, but we have to use it now to see if we've set a new high score. So this code will run when the ball is hit aside and the colours do not match. So into check match, into the else, and here all we have to do is run wrong match. So if the ball and the side do not match, run this, and this will effectively end our game. So all of the code will go in here in the next video, but this is the end of the game. So all we have to do at the end of the game, so when the ball and the side do not match, is see if our score is greater than our high score, and if it is, we want to save it. So if score, the number which is the score in our current game, is greater than high score, then what we want to do is update the value of high score to be the same as score. So take our score from this game, set it to high score, and then save high score in the user defaults by saying user defaults.standard set integer high score as high score saved. So now what we're doing, when the game ends, we're saying if our score from this game is greater than our high score, and remember high score is holding the value that we have loaded up from our user defaults. So if our score is greater than our high score, update the value of high score because we have now set a new high score, and then save this new high score as high score saved. So next time we load up our high score, we are loading up our brand new high score. Okay, so make sure where you are loading this from, this here, is the exact same as where we are saving it to. Okay, so we're loading up our high score at the start of the game, and if when the game ends, so when the ball was hit aside and the colours do not match, if our score is greater than our high score, then update the value of our high score and save our new high score. So next time when we load up our high score, we load up the new high score. So that's our high score loading and saving. All we have to do now is show this on the screen. And we want a label in our game scene that will show our high score. So globally, we are declaring this globally because we will be using this in a few different places throughout our scene. We will say let high score label be an SK label node. It will use the custom font. we will set this up and add this in our did move to view. So our label will have a starting text that will say best and then whatever the value of high score is. So this label will say the word best and then show whatever our high score is. This label will have a position halfway across the scene, 80% up. It will have a font color of dark grey to stick to our theme. This will have a font size of 100, so it'll be quite a bit smaller than our score label because we want the focus to be on our score label, and then simply add our high score label, like so. So now we're loading up our high score and setting this value to high score. We're then displaying a label in our game scene just underneath our score label, and this label will say best and it will show our high score. Then when the game has finished, so when the ball was hit aside and it is the wrong colour, we're saying if our score is greater than our high score, therefore we've set a new high score, then update the value of our high score and save this. So that will have our high score working. So let's hit run and let's have a look. As you can now see, we have our label that says best and our current high score is 0. So let's start the game. We'll score a few points and then we will make the ball hit aside with a different colour, which would trigger the end of the game. So let's get a few points. And then we get one wrong. So that would be the end of the game. But as we have not got our end of the game in place yet, if we just hit stop and go back into the game, so run it again, you can now see it says our high score is 2. So let's beat this. The game would have ended. Our score is greater than our high score, so we are now saving our new high score. Let's rerun. And as you can see, our high score has updated to 4. This time, if we don't beat our high score, so we only got 1. If we go back in, as our score at the end of the game wasn't greater than our high score stays at 4. Okay, so that's our high score set up and it's all working. Now there's one more thing I want to do to polish this off, and that is I want to update this label here to show our new high score during the game if we beat the high score during the game. So if our high score is 4 and we get to 5 and the game is still going on, I want this label to update to show the new high score even though the game hasn't finished yet. So all we have to do when we score a point, so into our correct match function, what we will do is say if score is greater than high score here, what we will do, we will update our high score label text to say best, and for now, as the placeholder for our new high score, because as our score is greater than our high score, we have set a new high score. For now, our high score label will say best, and then it will show the value of score, which will become the new high score at the end of the game. And just with that, what we can now do, hit run. Now if we beat the score during the game, our label will update to show our new high score as we go. So let's beat 4. And as you will see, our high score label updates as we go to show our new high score. Then when we get game over, we'll then save our new high score. So that is now our high score system all set up and working. And I know for now we have to close the game and go back into it to check it because we haven't got the end of our game in place yet. But the high score system is now all working. Okay, so we now have our score system all set up, we have our sound effects playing, and we have our high score system all set up. There's just one more thing we want to do when the ball hits the side and the colours match. And that is, we want to have a level system in our game, which in 7 sides is sort of a difficulty system, where basically, when the game begins, the ball will take, say, 2 seconds to move from the centre of the screen to hit one of the sides. When you reach a certain score, we want the game to sort of level up, and then the ball will only take, say, 1.8 seconds to move to a side. Then, when you reach another score, we want to level up again, and then the ball will only take, say, 1.5 seconds to reach a side. So basically, when you reach a certain score, we want each new ball to move to a side faster. Therefore, the higher the score, the more difficult the game will become. Now, there's a few ways we could have done this. And for this, what I think we will do, we will set up a variable which will contain how fast the ball is going to move to one of the sides. Then we will use this variable to control how quickly the ball is moving to one of the sides. Then, when we reach a certain score, all we have to do is change the value of this variable. So as we will use this variable all over the place, into our models and data, and one last section for our level system, or our difficulty system, or whatever you want to call it. I always like to call them level systems. Var ball movement speed, and this will be of type time interval, a number in seconds, and we'll start this off being set to 2. Build this, then jump into our ball object.swift and find the action that will move the ball to a certain side across a certain duration. Now here, rather than saying take 2 seconds, we will say set the duration to whatever ball movement speed is set to. So if this is set to 2, the ball will take 2 seconds to get to a side. If it's set to 1.9, it will take 1.9 seconds to get to a side. Set to 1.5, it will take 1.5 seconds to get to a side, and so on. So now all we have to do is change the value of ball movement speed to change how long the ball will take to get to a side. We have given ball movement speed a starting value of 2, so at the start of the game each new ball will take 2 seconds to reach a side. We'll be updating this variable throughout the game so the ball gets faster. Then, just like our score variable, in the next video, when we set up game over and being able to restart the game, we will set this variable back to 2. So even though we will be updating the value of ball movement speed as we go, when a new game begins, it will always have a starting value of 2. So at the start of the game, each new ball will take 2 seconds to reach a side. Back into our game scene, and now all we want to do after we've added a point to our score is say if we reach a certain score, change the value of ball movement speed. So for this we will use a switch statement and we will switch on score, where here we will say if score is set to 5, change ball movement speed to 1.8. If we reach 5, change the variable ball movement speed to 1.8. So if we reach 5, all of the balls will take 1.8 seconds to reach the side. Before we reach 5, ball movement speed will still be at its starting value of 2, so each ball will take 2 seconds to reach a side. So when you're playing the game up to 5 points, the ball will take 2 seconds to reach a side. When you reach a score of 5, the ball will only take 1.8 seconds to reach a side, therefore making the game harder. If we was to reach 15, set ball movement speed to 1.6. If we was to reach 25, set ball movement speed to 1.5. If we reach 40, set ball movement speed to 1.4. And if we was to reach 60, set ball movement speed to 1.3. And if score does not equal any of these values, then we have to do something. So we will just print a blank message to ourselves. So this won't really do anything, but we have to have some code in the default. Okay, so what we're doing is saying if score reaches 5, change ball movement speed to 1.8 seconds. Then when each new ball is spawned, the ball will take 1.8 seconds to reach its side. If the score reaches 15, set ball movement speed to 1.6 seconds. Then, when each new ball is spawned, the ball will only take 1.6 seconds to reach a side. If the score reaches 25, set ball movement speed to 1.5, so each new ball will only take 1.5 seconds, and so on. And just as a quick recap, as ball movement speed has a starting value of 2, and when each game starts, ball movement speed will be 2, before we reach a score of 5, ball movement speed will be set to its starting value of 2. So at the start of the game, and up until we reach 5 points, each new ball will take 2 seconds to reach a side. Now these numbers here, so setting how quickly the ball is going to move from the center to the side, will have such a massive impact on your game. These numbers here will determine if your game is too easy or too hard, or just right. And that, in a game like this, is one of the biggest make or break factors in the game. If it's too easy or too hard, the game can be very bland. But if you get this just right, it'll make the game as fun as possible. Now I'll be honest and say these are literally example numbers just to make the level system in our game here in the tutorial work. I'll be honest and say setting the difficulty system in games when it comes to coding is my weakest area. So I've just used example numbers here. When this game is finished, if you wanted to make this game seriously, when we're all done, come back, play around with these numbers and play around with the difficulty system and try and get this just right for you. Okay, and that for our difficulty system is actually it. So now ball movement speed is going to start off at 2. So each ball will take 2 seconds to move to a side. If we get to a score of 5, each ball will then take 1.8 seconds to reach a side. If we get to a score of 15, each ball will take 1.6 seconds to get to a side. If we reach a score of 25, each ball will take 1.5 seconds to get to each side, and so on. So this will control how quickly the ball is going to move to a side. Now it's very important that we run the code to spawn a ball after our level system. Otherwise, we're going to reach a certain score of say 5, update our ball movement speed, say 1.8, but if the ball was spawning before all of this, then this new value wouldn't be used on the current ball that's being spawned. So if we was to spawn a ball before doing all of this, it would use the old ball movement speed, but now if we spawn a ball after updating ball movement speed, it will use 1.8 from 5 and upwards, 1.6 from 15 and upwards, 1.5 from 25 and upwards, and so on. So it's very important we spawn the ball after we update our ball movement speed. So let's test this out, and these changes to the ball speed are pretty minimal. The game will get more difficult, but it'll be pretty subtle. So to test this, for now, we will change ball movement speed to 1 second if we get to a score of 5, just to test this out. So hit run. And when we start the game, the first few balls will take 2 seconds to reach their side. Then, when we hit 5, this speed will change so the balls will go much, much faster. So we just want to make sure the speed of the ball is changing. So we made this quite an extreme change just for test purposes. So let's hit 5. So the next ball should be quicker, and it's a lot quicker. Okay, so our level system is working. So now we know that's working. Let's change this speed back to 1.8. So if we hit 5, the ball won't take 1 second to get to a side. It will take 1.8 seconds. And now we have our level system all set up. And we've now taken what we had already, and we have now turned it into a game with a score system, a high score system, and a level system. All we have to do now is set up the end of the game when the ball hits a side and the colours don't match, and we will have a playable game. So that wraps up this video. All we have left to do in our game now is to set up the end of the game and to polish everything off. So in the next video, we will set up the end of the game, so that when a ball hits a side and the colours don't match, it'll be game over and we will be taken into a game over scene, and from there we can just restart the game and play again. But for this video, that is all. As always, thank you for watching. Leave any questions or any feedback down in the comments. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.